Inside the Arena is presented by Snoqualmie Casino and Hotel, Seattle's closest sportsbook.
Welcome to Inside the Arena, your source for everything off the ice, off the court, and outside the field of play. With your hosts, KOMO Sports Director Niko Tamurian and KOMO Senior Reporter Chris Daniels.
67 straight weeks.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
We're laying down the boom.
67 was a good year in Seattle.
It
Right?
was.
Yeah.
It was a couple years before the pilots came to town.
Right? You know, talking
And
about.
like 5 years after the fair.
There you go.
I was doing math in my
What, Sonics, right?
Sonics too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go.
It was a good year. And you know what was a good year too?
What's that?
A couple of good years back in, say like 13, 14.
Yeah. How about that? And that's a great segue, by the way. I was like, for a split second there, I'm like, where the heck is he going with this? Yeah. The franchise, a Seattle Seahawks story. Michael-Shawn Dugar of The Athletic wrote a book about the greatest era of Seahawks football. And I got to say, you'll see this interview. I was able to talk with him. First and foremost, we get to talk to Mike all the time. I see him at the VMAG. Great writer, even better guy. Just love being around. He's a Coug.
Yeah.
And what I really love about this book, and you'll see it in the interview, is you don't put it down. The storytelling of it is presented in a way that even if you know everything, you're a diehard Hawks fan, know everything about the Legion of Boom, you're still going to learn something.
Yeah.
And even the things that you already knew, you're going to hear it in a different light. Say from Doug Baldwin, say from, Brandon Browner, even, who was like one of the charter members of the Legion of Boom before things changed. And it's just presented in a real way. And of course, there's a significant amount of time to talk about the play in the Super Bowl that we don't like to talk about. And even those angles are fascinating. The guys that, maybe that was the crescendo of things, or maybe the turning point of things on the surface, but things were festering before that. Just a really great and informative and entertaining read. We're going to talk about that in a little while.
Yeah, I've enjoyed Michael-Shawn Dugar's work for years, so it's
Great
great
dude.
to have him inside the arena. We're also going to have an expanded Supersonic Minute here discussing what Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, had to say once again about expansion, and also Steve Ballmer. There was some news out of the NBA regarding that this week, but what do we like to do every week, Niko?
Touch them all.
We like to touch them all. Four corners. What's good? What's bad? Off the ice, off the court, off the field of play. Niko, as always, batting leadoff. What do you like?
Seattle Storm.
Yeah, how about
Going
that?
to the playoffs, and I know the playoffs, getting going in earnest, kind of, as we present this show. But the fact that when the backs Bill Fesh, producer
Wow.
Bill. Wow, I love that. What I love about it though is, backs against the wall, they had to have the win, and otherwise you were kind of forced to hope that LA would lose, and they seem to be picking it up at the right time. It doesn't matter anymore. They got the win they needed, and somebody like Erica Wheeler hits the game-winning shot. Somebody that was moved to the bench after the trade of Brittany Sykes didn't matter, still super productive, and somebody that has really embraced Seattle in this one season so far here. We'll see what happens, but I just that snippet, right? Backs against the wall, you get the play you need. Climate Pledge Arena was absolutely rocking. I posted a shot of the reaction after, and people were like, yeah, NBA needs to see this as a basketball city. They already know, and we'll talk about what's going on with that in a minute, but the Storm has made sure we remain a basketball city.
Yeah, electric inside the arena, and the Storm have been putting on a show all year, and it really does feel like the buzz, the energy in the building is different this year.
It does. We know about the exponential growth of the W. Look at the franchise expansion fees. Golden State, who started this year, paid $50 million. The three new cities that are going to start later in the decade, Detroit, Cleveland, are going to pay $250 million. I mean, that says it all right there. But you can also just go to Climate Pledge Arena and see the upper bowl filled now, and you can see the energy, not just on a game winner, but throughout the game when there's a 10-0 run to start the fourth quarter. That's sign of the growth of the game, and certainly the support from our fans here in Seattle.
Well, nice. And you know what I'll tell you, I think is nice this week. After so many years of talking about it, and after watching Husky Stadium get it, Washingon State University has finally been allowed at Martin Stadium to sell beer.
I'm like, is that somebody like scoffing a beer down?
Bill with the extra sound effects.
He was ready for this one. I love it.
Yeah, it's dating back to Pat Shunn. I mean, there had been a lot of discussion on campus about the ability to sell beer and wine at Martin Stadium. They wanted to do it for years, but the Liquor and Cannabis Board in Washington State had come back to Washington State University and said, hey, your concourses aren't wide enough. You need to have some extra regulations. And this is something that now they're one of the last schools to do. There's actually been a lot of discussion dating back to West Virginia University, and they were the first to make the argument that you should allow beer and wine sales at a college game because not only are you benefiting financially, but you're reducing the calls for service outside. You're reducing the amount of people that leave the stadium, binge drink, come back in, the problems associated with that. And so a lot of schools have followed suit. University of Washington's been doing it now for a few years, and people don't leave at halftime to go outside to the dog zone and pound a couple of drinks before they come back in. So Washington State University, they've had issues with the attendance in the third and fourth quarter. This is something that a lot of Cougs, a lot of fans have wanted, and it's going to be in place in time for the Apple Cup.
How great is that? Just
an added little element to the Apple Cup.
Yeah. So, and listen, it's great to see from the standpoint, like you said, it's not, oh, yeah, we got, okay, that's great. But it actually makes sense and does, as you said a minute ago, studies shown make things safer.
And not in the student section. So that's one thing. There is a plan. This is just for the area on the one half of the stadium, essentially, or 2/3 of the stadium, students not allowed into that area.
There you go.
So what don't you like?
Well, it's something similar to what you're going to talk about. So I'm going to set up what you're going to talk about. Mine is sort of like the discrepancy in punishment between Leagues Cup and MLS. And you'll get to that in a minute. Yeah. I think it's fascinating that MLS handed out a more stiff, the Leagues Cup handed out a more stiff round of suspensions to Suarez, added a couple other Miami players. Now, granted, it's only a suspension for that annual tournament. MLS comes back and they just have something for Suarez, not nearly as severe. The other two guys had nothing there. And the Sounders staffer was punished even, Steven Leonard was punished even further than the Leagues Cup.
Credentials revoked?
Yeah, and the Sounders get fined. I'm like, wait. He didn't spit on anybody. He didn't grab somebody by the neck in a celebration. And listen, in MLS circles, you know the deal. There's always that Inter is going to get preferential treatment, and with obviously Messi and Suarez and that crew. And I'm not going to outright allege that, but it's like when you have that rumor out there, it's things like this that perpetuate it, right?
Yeah.
When Leagues Cup, just a once a year tournament, hands down a penalty that is just exponentially more severe and probably more accurate for the team that started and had the most heinous parts of that skirmish. So you're going to talk about it. I just don't like the discrepancy.
Well, I'll just echo. We'll kind of go between third and home here.
Like there's a rundown, and we're going to try.
Where there's a rundown, we're going back and forth. And to catch people up. I mean, Suarez, who clearly spit on a Sounders security guard, the head of security. We talked about this at length on the show last week. He was suspended for 6 matches in the Leagues Cup. Sergio as well, who took a swing for Miami against the Sounders. He also got a suspension, but that's in the Leagues Cup. They may not even play in the Leagues Cup again. Both those guys are near the end of their careers. So there's a question like, okay, MLS got to do something. You can't just have Luis Suarez spit on somebody and get away with it. So he's been suspended for 3 games. And yes, everything else you mentioned. So at least he's getting penalized out of this whole thing.
Sure.
But nobody's getting penalized for taking a swing or trying to choke out a Sounders player on the field. It means that Suarez will not be playing against the Sounders when they meet up later this month.
Yeah.
So there is that. But I think a lot of people are going to be watching that game just to see if the tensions boil over once again.
I will be. I mean, we would watch anyway, but I'll be keeping at it. So what else don't you like, though?
So what else I don't like is what it is kind of this transcendent story between news and sports. We've been talking about it on KOMO TV for a while, the break-ins at some professional athlete homes, Richard Sherman's home. We found out here in the last week, Ichiro Suzuki also had a break-in at his home. His wife was assaulted, and it does appear Patrick Maisonette is the prime suspect. He has been in court. You can look at the video on KOMOnews.com. Did not seem to show any sort of remorse. And, of course, innocent until proven guilty, but he flipped off the cameras, wasn't too happy to see the cameras and said a bunch of other stuff. all of it is bad. Macklemore was a victim in that apparent crime ring. It's just all bad, and it's all related to the world of sports. And we know, hearing from Julio Rodriguez and his girlfriend Jordan Heidema from the Rain, that they were pretty shaken up by this. And Ichiro and everything else through the year has had this fantastic personal career or personal year with the Hall of Fame and the retirement ceremony. Nobody knew that he was dealing with this at home as well.
It makes you sick to your stomach. I mean, what else can you say? It's awful.
Yeah, it's awful. So let's kind of flip the script a little bit. We like to talk about the NBA to Seattle story every week, the Supersonic Minute. It's going to be a little extended this week because we did hear once again from NBA Commissioner Adam Silver about the status of expansion. The Board of Governors, made up of owners and team representatives, meeting again in New York. Silver was not only asked about NBA expansion and where everything stands in relation to potential international expansion, but he was asked about this big story that has it was broken by Pablo Torre, and there's been a lot discussed about Steve Ballmer, Kawhi Leonard, the LA Clippers, questions about whether Steve Ballmer helped to finance a startup company where Kawhi Leonard apparently had an endorsement deal and did nothing for it. That's at least the allegation. The question is, how is the NBA going to respond? And Adam Silver was asked directly about an investigation into Steve Ballmer and the Clippers, and also asked about where expansion stands, which a lot of people in Seattle care about. Here's what he had to say.
When the podcast came out, it was news to me. I'd frankly never heard of the company Aspiration before, and I'd never heard a whiff of anything around an endorsement deal with Kawhi or anything around engagement with the Los Angeles Clippers. So it was all new to me. I heard it. I saw some of the follow-up information. We spoke internally. Rick Buchanan, our general counsel, is here, who oversees any investigations. Rick had a conversation with Steve Ballmer, and we quickly concluded this was something that rose to the level that necessitates an investigation. In fact, one that's done outside of our office, and Wachtell Lipton, New York law firm that we've used in the past for for investigations like this, is overseeing it. And again, I would also say I've been around the league long enough in different permutations of allegations and accusations that I'm a big believer in due process and fairness, and you need to now let the investigation run its course.
Just as a follow-up, how broad do your powers extend as far as the collective bargaining agreement, as far as penalties you can assess to the Clippers, to Kawhi Leonard?
My powers are very broad, the full range of financial penalties, draft picks, suspensions, etc. I have very broad powers in these situations. I mean, I think there are independent people looking at potential domestic expansion, and then others looking at opportunities in Europe. And I see them as completely independent opportunities. The fact is, no new news to report today on domestic expansion, but it's something we continue to look at. We did discuss it at the board meeting. I think that we've spent a fair amount of time on the economic models around expansion. We've gotten into I'd say a deeper dive than when I last addressed the media on it. Certainly now that we know what our media contracts are, that helps in doing the math, at least over the next decade. I mean, part of the difficulty in potentially assessing it is a sense of long-term value of the league, and a little bit, maybe it's a high-class problem, but with some of the recent jumps in franchise valuations, that's sort of creates some confusion in the marketplace about how you might even price an expansion franchise. So I'll only say it's something we continue to actively look at. I will say also maybe, there's a complete independent look what we may do in Europe versus the United States. I think adding teams to an existing league where you have, from a national standpoint at least, a fixed pie of revenue is very different than looking at an opportunity in Europe where it's a clean slate. And while there is an existing operation there, it's sort of a greenfield in terms of what the opportunity might be. But to the extent anyone's taken from me suggestion that Europe is more a priority than potential expansion in the U.S., it's not the case. I mean, I view it as two independent work streams here.
So there you have it. I think the news that came out of the Board of Governors was more about Steve Ballmer and an investigation and where that all takes things versus expansion. It almost seems like the comments from Silver there were a little bit more tepid. Of course, he didn't have any Seattle reporters in the room. Tim Bontemps was the one from ESPN who asked that question about international versus domestic expansion. It's not going to be what people from Seattle, frankly, want to hear, and doesn't seem like there's any urgency to move that ball down the court.
No, and it feels like Tim's question was on point. It feels like the momentum has slowed ever since we started hearing about the Jim Dolan circling the wagons, so to speak, and that sort of stuff. So I guess we just got to hang on and hope that this committee that is formed finds what everybody in the Pacific Northwest knows. Yeah,
if you're just kind of hanging on every word of Adam Silver, it might be time to read a good book. See what I did there?
You were on the segues today. Yeah. The franchise, the Seattle Seahawks story, Michael-Shawn Dugar's incredible chronicling of the best era in Seahawks football. And it was great to talk to him about how he did the research and the things he learned. What was the biggest surprise? And he's got a great relationship with these guys. Remember a few years ago, he did this, not a Legion Boom guy, but he, went to Texas and hung out with Quandre Diggs. And that's the way Mike reports. It's takes you right to the story. And you'll see that in this book. And we're going to talk about that right after this.
Luxury has arrived at Snoqualmie Casino and Hotel. The hotel is officially open. Book now for an unforgettable experience. Enjoy sweeping cascade views, a new sports bar, and play your favorite games. Visit snowcasino.com for details. Seattle's closest is now Snoqualmie Casino and Hotel.
Well, here we are with Michael-Shawn Dugar. And first of all, I know, actually, full disclosure, I said this before we started rolling with this, but I loved every minute of reading the franchise. And it's just something really special to look at that era, but also see a lot of stories that people didn't know about. And the ones that maybe they did or thought they knew about, they got a whole new side of the story or was brought in a whole new light. So I guess I want to start with, for you, as you were researching, as you were talking to folks, what was that process like, gathering some of the information to put this whole story together?
Yeah, I think the main thing to start with, well, thank you first off, but also to start with, it was, okay, who can I get? Because the voices can change the tone of the story depending on who you get. If you get the subject of a chapter, Marshawn Lynch texted me the day of my wedding, that he could do the interview. So our timing didn't work out there. I was putting my tux on, like, as he said, "What's up? You ready to do it?" And I'm like, "You're killing me, man. I'm about to get married in like 30 minutes, But so that was important, because there, in certain of these cases, I think particularly with Russ, it really helps to like get that subject. And then with other people like a Bobby, you can write around Bobby, so that's a chapter I wrote last, for instance, because I can write around Bobby. I've been around him enough. But sometimes to get those little nuggets, it's almost even better to get, other people, a fun example. There's some not so fun examples in there, but a fun one was finding out why he's Angry Doug. That's like, it's a common thing in Seattle, Angry Doug, like, why is he Angry Doug? And then I think I got that one of the initial versions of the story about the scene in the Dallas game his rookie year from Sidney Rice, and later talked to Doug, but like getting the other people was cool. Sometimes it's good to work with those people first, that people around the subject, and then get the subject instead of the reverse order that people think of, that I probably would have done if I wrote this 7 years ago instead of, over the last couple years. So yeah, that was really fun. That's kind of where I started. And then just kind of worked from the Legion of Boom guys backwards, started with Cam, Earl, Sherm, Brandon Browner, who I'm sure a lot of people would not think would get as much ink as he does in the book. But when you read the book, you're like, oh, okay. He makes a lot of sense to spend time on. He was a big part of not only the team on the field, but who they were. He was the first big corner they signed. He was acquired before Sherm. It was just it was a big deal to get him, and he kind of embodied a lot of the spirit of the Legion of Boom. I think he co-signed the name of it. Like he was big. So yeah, I started with those guys and worked backwards. I think you were saying it came out well. I was really proud of those guys in particular, like the stuff about the Legion of Boom guys.
Well, I'll say that, as you know, with your little ones, it can be tough to read a book when you've got toddlers and babies running around. And I have one 3-year-old at home, but I made it a point, not just for the story, because I couldn't put it down as well. So yeah, I do mean it genuinely. And I suppose my next question is partially self-explanatory, just given the timing of it, right? But I wanted to ask, why did now feel like the right time, and what compelled you to say, okay, let's put this on in ink, as you say. Let's tell this story of the greatest era of Seahawks football.
Yeah, I think so. Triumph Books, the publisher, reached out, I think in June 2023. That was about a month before my daughter was born. Now my son is a month and a half old, speaking of the little ones. But I think the timing made sense for a few reasons. For one, why wait for ESPN or whoever to make the documentary, right? Like, why not just do it first? I was there, like whatever producers they hire probably won't have been there, they'll do all this research that I'm gonna do. So that was part of it. I feel like the Legion of Boom, it's almost referred to often in Seattle as, oh man, the 30 for 30 on that team is going to be crazy. It's like, well, yeah, sure, but why wait? I don't have to wait. A fan can wait. I shouldn't have to, right? If I can get the funding or the backing or the support, the infrastructure, why not go ahead and do it? It was also when they were celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the Super Bowl team. So that just kind of felt just perfect. I don't know if that's why Triumph reached out when they did, but it just made sense to me. And it feels like we were just far enough removed from the glory days to get the nostalgia love for the fans. Like, oh man, that's cool. I'm going reading back about insert this thing here. But a lot of the guys are still around. They're still in the public, so it just felt like we're not too far removed. We're not writing about yesteryear in that sense. Like, I think the Bears just celebrated what does that be, like 40 years or something of like the 85 Bears or something like that, right? So that writing a book about them or something, then you're writing about way back when you're chasing down people whose memories may not be great of some of the details. It just felt like, all right, let's get this stuff going now. And I think the last part is, and you've seen this, and I think all consumers have, docs are getting made so fast. Like, we're already reminiscing about stuff so quickly. There's already a documentary about the USA men's Olympic team that won gold in Paris, right? Already. They just won it like a year ago. There's already a team. Like, compare that to how long it took to get a documentary made about the Dream Team, for instance, that took multiple decades, So that also created the urgency. I was like, I need to do this now, before someone else does. Cause I feel like that's just the world we live in now. Active players have documentaries about them. We're not even waiting until people are done and to make the thing about them. So, and this era is over, so I might as well do it now.
No, absolutely. And I think that's, I think, one of the coolest parts about the books. Doug Baldwin obviously plays such a big part in this story, and he only stopped playing 6, 7 years ago, I suppose now. And so as you say, like, you can hear him reference a specific game, and you mentioned one a minute ago, but there's several obviously specific things in there. And it's not just Doug, obviously. I'm just using that as an example. And 90% of diehard Seahawks fans, especially, like, oh yeah, I remember that exact moment. Maybe even more than that. I might be underselling it. How fun was that part of it to know the story you were telling is something that is still pretty fresh in people's minds in that way too.
Yeah, that was great, and it was. I shout out one of my colleagues, Jason Jenks at The Athletic. He's really good working with him about just finding the little nugget to the thing everyone already knows about in totality. I think Super Bowl 49 is probably the biggest example in the book, but even just little nuggets about Russ's rookie year or the Marshawn trade or anything, even if it's just one thing new, it can feel really grand if you package it the right way and add some color to it. I thought that was really fun to do. The other part is, I'm 33 years old. I was in college at Washington State when they won the Super Bowl. I think my senior year of college is the year they lose the Super Bowl. So I'm not watching those games with the same eye that I'm watching football with now. Before we just hopped on this podcast, I was watching film. I didn't watch film in 2013. I didn't watch film in 2012. So when I went back and watched all of those games for this book, I could see things differently. I could see plays differently. I viewed Russ differently. I viewed the Legion of Boom differently, because of how I was looking at the game. It's much different than just being at one of my college friends' apartment, a bunch of beers and chicken wings, watching a playoff game, right? We're playing beer pong during the commercials or whatever. Now I'm watching it alone, lights off, like watching it, really learning and knowing the game. So I thought that it made my research stronger, but that also, when I got some of these guys, I had better questions to ask, instead of just, tell me about the tip, or whatever. Now I know the play call, know the techniques, all this stuff. And again, Super Bowl 49 is where that really comes into play, I think, in the book, because just even explaining the name of the play call. You know, if Daryl Bevell had told me that 10 years ago, 3 scat pivot halo, I'd have been like, all right, speak English next time, Bev. Like, what are you talking about? But now I know what that is. I know what a scat protection is, pivot route, all these things I understand now, and it just makes the writing stronger. So that was really fun because, I'm from Seattle. I watched all the games I'm talking about in the book, but there's much different watching them, in college or at age 22 or whatever versus, 32 with a much different eye.
Well, and you hit perfectly on something I wanted to touch on in the idea that you can present it a certain way. So, where you were writing about that play call coming in and the huddle, and you hear it from all these different guys, like, yeah, 9 of these other guys are like, wait, what is this play call? And, to hear it presented in that way, even though we all know what happened, of course, we all know in hindsight, how people feel about it after, but I just felt it was presented in that way. I think that it really brought people through again in a new way that maybe they hadn't thought of, like in the huddle, hearing what, different guys had to say. And as you were talking to him about that, I imagine it's like all those memories come flooding back, and it's almost like they're getting that same play call again here, 10 years later or so.
Yeah, Daryl Bevell was a fun one for that. I spoke to him multiple times for the book, and I saved some of the Super Bowl 49 questions for the end. He worked for the Dolphins, or at least did at the time of the interview, so we had a very finite amount of time to talk, but he broke that. He went off for like 20 minutes about the play call and the aftermath of it and everything. Because like you said, you get him going. He's like, you know what? And then this, and then you know what else, Mike? And then this. He just kept rolling, and it was great. It was cool to get his perspective. It was great to get Ricardo Lockett's perspective. That's one that he has talked about the play, but it just felt really fresh hearing it directly from him. And then even Marshawn, I thought. I've always kind of felt bad for Marshawn, but just a different level of empathy over the years to hear him on multiple podcasts, just in multiple public spaces say, when people see me, they ask me why I didn't get the ball, right? And to think about all the cool stuff that Marshawn's ever done for his hometown, for the city of Seattle, his business acumen. He's got a Hall of Fame argument with his career. He's done all these great things, but if you run into him in the airport, chances are you're going to ask him about the thing he didn't do. And that would really bug me just on a personal level. I do all these things, it's like, imagine I wrote 10 books about the Seahawks and football and about curing cancer or whatever. And then people see me and it's like, yeah, man, how come you didn't write about this? It's like, well, hey man, maybe it wasn't in my control. That would really bug me. And not to say that it bugs Marshawn, but I can tell it does because he keeps bringing it up. And that's real, though. That's something you wouldn't otherwise maybe consider. You just think, well, yeah, of course he wanted to score the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl, as we all would. But now half of his career is remembered from casual observers as the guy who didn't. And it wasn't even his fault. It's not like he got stuffed at the one. That's like a really, I thought, humanizing window into a play like you said, we all already know about.
Yeah, I mean, think about it with Marshawn too. Like, you could probably pick a half dozen things off the top of your head, like pop culture or whatever. Like, he was the guest on game day. The first thing Nick Saban says is, "Oh, by the way, I'm giving you the ball at the 1 yard line." Like, it's top of mind for people.
It's a pop culture reference now. Right. Marshawn at the 1 yard line. Yeah, and he laughs it off almost every time. But man, that would bug me, man. That would bug me to be the thing I didn't do and I didn't have control over. That's that hurts.
Yeah, and as far as, especially as you mentioned during that era, I mean, Marshawn was, the guy, and it's interesting to think, so many people, again, casual observers, look at that play, that moment as maybe the beginning of some of the things that broke apart later on, but in reality, it was kind of like the crescendo, so to speak, and that was something that was really enlightening to me, because, I wasn't covering the team in, say, 2012, 13, 14, to understand that, maybe guys had issues with Russ before that time, right, wrong, or indifferent, right? How was that something that, as you went through, you were learning about, or you already had inklings to? Like, take me through that process for you.
Yeah, so I started covering the team in 2017, and maybe I was cursed or something like that, because that's when Cliff broke his neck, Cam broke his neck, Sherm blew his Achilles. It was just a mess. The Legion of Boom fell apart. Right in front of me. They missed the playoffs that year after making it every year for the past like 5 or 6 seasons. So I kind of came in when it was becoming Russ's team. So I didn't cover all that stuff either. So yeah, I was like simultaneously learning about the relationship with his teammates, coming into it with the knowledge of kind of how the deterioration of the relationship between Russ, Pete, John, and kind of ownership had gone. That part I knew about because I covered that at The Athletic pretty extensively. But that's different than his relationship with the players. And that part I was able to dig deep on in the research. And it was just absolutely fascinating because, like you said, right, wrong, or indifferent, guys felt a way. And that's the part I wanted to convey because at first when I was writing the book, I was kind of relitigating some of it. You know, it's like who had a point, who didn't. It kind of felt like I was a daycare teacher. You know, you snatch the kids' applesauce, like go make them apologize. Like, well, I don't feel like I need to do that in the book because that's not the point. Ultimately, the conclusion I came to is it doesn't matter if you agree with why the defensive players felt the way about Russell. The fact is that they did, and that it impacted the team. That's really what matters. Same thing with the guys on offense who felt the way, and the guys who didn't care. Some guys were like, "All right, Russ, see you tomorrow." You know, after walking out of the VMAX. Some guys were like, "Man, I hate this dude." You know, and all of that made him a polarizing figure. And yes, before he even throws the interception in Super Bowl 49, there are guys with really strong feelings about him in multiple directions. There are guys who love Russ, still do. Guys who keep in touch with him and everything. I think he was at Tyler Lockett's wedding a couple years ago. The guys who really enjoy him. But there are a lot of guys who are like, he ain't no Hall of Famer. We could have won the Super Bowl with Matt Flynn. There's just all of these kind of visceral feelings, towards the guy who is probably the best quarterback in franchise history and a 10-time Pro Bowler. I found the Russell chapters. I worked on those throughout the book. I didn't just like stop and not come back to them. I think the last thing I did was finish the Russell chapters. It's just so fascinating, like on a personal level, because on the surface too, it kind of if you dig deeper, I should say, not the surface, it contrasts with his public perception. When I'm in an Uber in another city and the Uber driver asks me, "Hey, what are you here for?" "Oh, I'm here for the Seahawks game." And they just bring up Russell Wilson and how much they love him, and he's a family man, and he's taking care of somebody else's son. He's just the perfect guy, right? Like if he hosted Good Morning America 10 years from now, no one would be surprised, right? He's that type of dude. And meanwhile, there are guys who went to war with him every Sunday who are like, "I hate that guy." It's like, how do we get there? And that was the thing I wanted everybody, if you're a Seahawks fan or a Bears fan or whatever fan, just to take away from I wanted everyone to understand that dynamic. Agree with it, whatever, don't care. But if you just close the book and you're like, "Wow, I get it now. That was nuts." Then I did my job.
And that's one of the ways we talked about how I love the way the book was presented, because you'll read about, if you haven't read it yet, pick it up. But folks who are listening and watching this, you'll read about that play in Super Bowl 49 a couple different times. You'll read about Rabel's call in one, you'll read about Al Michaels' call in another, and one's presented through the lens of, Russ already has these feelings from some guys about him, and then he throws an interception on that play, which again, whoever's fault it is another topic of debate, but it doesn't help that sort of feeling towards him. And I thought that was fascinating that you could kind of present it in that lens. And from the guys you talked to, it kind of felt like, okay, this was always there, but then even if it's not Russ's fault to hand the ball to Marshawn at the one, right? He's the guy, and he's the guy who threw the pick, right? And kind of exacerbated things, right?
Yeah, and I think there was just an overall lack of, let's say, empathy, I would think, or maybe perspective on on parts of the guys. Think about it this way, right? You're Russell Wilson. You hear the play call because everyone's like, "Why didn't he change the play?" If you're a quarterback, right? I don't care how long you've been playing quarterback, for 10 minutes or 10 years, and you get in the huddle at the 1-yard line at the Super Bowl, and coach says, "Throw it." That is the moment you've been dreaming of. I don't care what anyone feels about Russell Wilson. We all just got to put ourselves in his shoes for a second, teammates included, and say, what would you do if coach asked you to throw the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl? Right? Like that's cool. Everyone would want that. Everyone would, in your backyard with your friends or at the park. That's what you do. So for the people who wanted him to, the teammates, I should say, who were, either wanted him to change the call, or when they went to Hawaii after the game, were upset that his truth, because they had their come to Jesus truth moment on this volcano or mountain in Hawaii or whatever. What his truth was, I would throw it again. Obviously he wouldn't throw a pick again, but it's like, I would throw it again. I trusted the process of the call. And, he lost some guys with that. And I thought that was unfair to Russell, because that's like, you're on the volcano or the mountain or whatever, so you can be truthful to one another. No cameras, no coaches, just be brothers. And he should be able to, that should be his truth without losing guys, I think. I guess they have the right to lose him in that sense, but I would have been like, you know what, that's your truth. You just like Marshawn put the pillows in his living room when he was a kid and dreamed about running the Super Bowl play for the Oakland Raiders. Well, who's to say Russ didn't do that as well? Maybe not for the Raiders, but so I thought that was unfair to him. But I think that speaks to their feelings toward him. They're like, you would have thrown it, man, get out of here. It's like, I don't know, man. Like, that seems pretty normal to me, just objective observer. Same thing with Ricardo Lockett. I feel like a lot of people don't give him enough. Don't try to put themselves in his shoes too. It's like all these people who wanted Marshawn to get it are ignoring that their other brother was supposed to get it. Ricardo Lockett, an undrafted guy, HBCU dude, like dropped out of school at some point, just like trained to run track. Like his family was there. Like that's the moment he dreamed of too. He was one of those kids whose dad was his coach growing up. His dad was there, I believe. So imagine that you're Ricardo. You're like, all right, cool, 3-scat pivot halo. It's my time. You know what I mean? Like, what do you guys mean? You're all upset Marshawn didn't get it. Like, you're not happy that I could have caught the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. I don't know if Ricardo has had that conversation with his guys, but when he was relaying his version of events to me, I was like, man, I perfectly get it. I get why you were fine with the play call. And if I was him, I'd feel away that all these guys are upset that that was supposed to be my moment. If I'm Ricardo. So many guys had. I feel like it's just so many emotions in it that just kind of lacks perspective, and it won't be. That's why another reason why to go back to your first question, why I would do it now. 'Cause I think 20 years from now, they'll all get it. They'll all be removed. They'll be grandparents and everything. They'll get it, right? For some of these guys, it is still fresh, and that's what you want, for the book, for it to feel still fresh. And I think that Russell in many ways was almost like a bystander, a little bit. They felt so strongly about their culture, their identity was Marshawn and defense. So throwing the ball to anyone was felt as a pivot from who they were, and that's not Russell's fault at all. He ain't the play caller. So I thought that he kind of guys already felt the way, but that made it worse in a way that wasn't even his fault. I really think that stood out in the research. Was just like, I don't know, man. I don't know if you guys, players that is, I don't know if you guys have much of a point here. You guys just don't like the quarterback, which is whatever. Some teammates don't like each other, but I do think as these guys get older, they will kind of just realize, or maybe they realize now and don't want to say it. Yeah, we just didn't like that guy. It wasn't as much of some of the things they claimed, either publicly or privately.
Yeah, and then again, one of the other things, the way the book is structured is, some of the first things you're reading about is all these individuals, and especially when it comes to the Legion of Boom, and whether it was a guy like Browner, who again maybe gets lost as maybe being one of those charter members, as you put it, but at the same time, it gives you a little bit of perspective. Like all these guys had, boulders, as some of them would say, like on their shoulders, and then you come into that situation, and I think that maybe let me get your take on this. Maybe that's part of why the reaction was what it was, because these guys are guys that scratched and clawed for everything that they had earned in the NFL, and then this chance at a dynasty 2 in a row mythical Super Bowls was kind of taken away in that fashion, right?
Yeah, and I think Doug's perspective, I think, is the best example of that. Like Doug used, for better or worse, used football as his vehicle to prove that he mattered to whoever. Insert here that he mattered to his college coach, his mother and father, his wife, the world. He proved his worth through football. Right? He studied really hard to just kill Darrelle Revis in that game, and he got one target in that game. It went for a touchdown, oddly enough. But you look at a guy like that who just, whether, again, for better or worse, to use football as that vehicle to prove your worth to the world, and then to not get a chance on the biggest stage amidst all of the critiques they're getting. You mentioned the chip on their shoulders. I think we've covered athletes long enough to know a lot of these guys are just kind of making it up. Doug was not making it up. None of those receivers were making it up. They were getting told to their face they weren't good enough. Doug, at the Super Bowl, did an interview with Deion Sanders where Deion tells him to his face, you are not the type of receiver where the other team will have their best corner follow you all game. Told that to Doug to his face at the Super Bowl. And then Darrelle Revis followed Doug the entire game. It's just like Doug was getting told he didn't need to manufacture motivation. He didn't need to channel some 6th grade geometry teacher who told him he'd never make it, right? He had in real time people telling him he wasn't good enough on TV and to his face. That's a lot to handle. So yeah, when you hear, 3-scat pivot halo, oh, wait a minute, I'm on the other side of this play. So I'm not going to get the ball, because they're all assuming it's going to work as well. So they think this is going to be the play and I'm not going to get it. That there's some selfishness to it, but also it's just real. It's just being a human being. Imagine you just get told you're just not good enough to your face. And in Doug's case, And all those receivers, they were getting told by people they respected. Chris Carter, Kurt Warner, Deion Sanders. These are Hall of Fame players telling them, you guys are just all right. That's one of Doug's famous rants too after the championship game. We just all right. We just all right. It's like, yeah, man, that would hurt. That's why I really wanted to get to the origins also of like the angry Doug Baldwin thing. Cause I was like, I don't know if he's angry. He's just being a human being,
Right.
You get told you're not good enough. It's going to bother you at some point, even if you are good enough. So I think but that goes into the anger and the frustration of the final play. It's like, wow, not only did we lose the Super Bowl, because of this guy I already don't like in a lot of those players' cases, now it's like I didn't even get a chance to show what I could do. I think that is so much going on beyond just throwing an interception in the Super Bowl, which on its face is already probably the worst thing you could do, in football, other than fumbling it at the 1 yard line.
Yeah, and at the same time, as much as that's kind of a crescendo of this thing, in a negative way, but the thing we learn about this team and why they were the way they were, individual guys, what made them special, is also what made that era, again, the best in Seahawks football. What was maybe the fun part for you? Like, was there anything that, I don't know, for lack of a better term, surprised you, or something you learned like, oh, wow, like that's no wonder why the Legion of Boom was able to achieve XYZ, that sort of thing. Was there anything like that popped up as you were kind of doing the research on that?
Yeah, actually, you look at just Earl Thomas, who I've interviewed and spoken to. You look at Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Brandon Brown, I have not interviewed in person, but just some of the other guys on the team. They all do feel really different. Even just how they, Cam has a little. You can tell he's just not from this side of the country. He's from Virginia. Earl too, you can kind of tell. Okay, that's a Texas boy. Like you just get the feel. Bobby, a Cali kid. KJ Wright, a Mississippi kid. They're all very, very different. Even Michael Bennett is also just very different from all of these people I just named. They're all very, very, very different people. But I thought in researching all of them individually, and in Michael Bennett's case, also reading his own book, I've learned that they were also about as alike as you can be in terms of what made them good at football. And it wasn't be big, strong, fast. It was why they were playing. Like, there was so much purpose tied to like love, and trying to prove something. And both of those things existing in the same space. Like Cam really wanted, he loved his family. He still does. I don't say past tense. He does. And that's what he was playing so damn hard all the time. You read about, or listen to him and his family members talk about their circumstances growing up. That's love, and it's a true like rags to riches type of story in the traditional sense. But then you get someone like Earl, who it wasn't like that. It wasn't roaches crawling on his family growing up and opening up the oven to heat the house. Their house was just gone, wiped away, I believe, in a hurricane. And that's a different level of love. Like Earl wanted to help rebuild his city. There's just something powerful about that, and that no matter where you come from, you can relate, and then just, Bobby with the, his mother, is his number one motivation, as it still is the case. It's just all these guys just had this like this bigger why of why they were doing this, whether for family members or for cities or whoever. And then they just all wanted to prove that they were the best at what they were. No one was settling for like, I'm one of the best linebackers. I'm one of the best receivers. I'm one of the best pass rushers. It was all, I am the best. Like how Ohio State guys talk about their school. They wanted the in front of their name, in front of their title. And the pursuit of that is something that also made them very alike. Even if they were from, Compton and Houston and Orange, Texas and Norfolk, like it was from all over in LA. I thought that was really, really powerful, because that is football in a nutshell, right? Like there's all these guys from all these different walks of life, but you can't make them like each other, right? They have to find the commonality between them and play for that. You can't just, you can watch Remember the Titans all you want and think that you just bust some guys to the middle of nowhere, make the black guys sit with the white guys, and they'll come back loving each other. That's just not how football works. You can't make them do it. They got to really care about the guy as a person next to them. And how can you care? You find out what makes you very similar. You ignore your differences, find out what makes you similar. And they found that. They found it very quickly. And that's what got them through. they lose the Super Bowl and go win 10 games the next year. Like a team that didn't love each other would have just won 3 games and then it would all got blown up. I think there was a lot of power in why they were playing and then ultimately why they were playing for one another. That was cool to learn about.
Yeah, and I think that's the secret. That was the secret sauce, for lack of a better term. That's what made made the Legion of Boom what it was. Mike, I'll leave you with this last question. I really appreciate your time. It's the cliche question, but it just your favorite part about putting this together. Something you learned, being able to put it together. What was as you're able to put this out? Maybe it's getting the book in your hand and saying, because that's obviously a heck of an achievement, right? What's your favorite part about this whole process for you?
There's a couple. I'll keep them short though. One of them was just Doug believing that I could do it. If you've ever spoken to Doug Baldwin, if he believes you can do something, that means you have shown him something. I don't want to call him a skeptical guy inherently, but he is very similar to like someone who just wants you to prove that you can do the thing first. He's not going to blindly believe in you. So Doug believed I could do it. That's why he agreed to write the foreword and kind of co-sign, because a foreword is a co-sign of a book you haven't read, right? So you got to have some faith there in the author, and he had that in me. That felt really cool. I knew I could do it, but to have someone from that era who's as bright and as tapped in as Doug is, believe and even vouch for me on a lot of cases. Some of the guys that were able to get interviews with were because they got a text or a call from Doug that says, "Hey, Mike's doing this, so you should do it." That meant a lot of just kind of step one. I was writing a lot of the book while I was on paternity leave with my daughter. So it's cool to have something that her and now my son can, look back on that has our last name on it, that has their names in it, or at least my daughter's name, because I didn't decide on my son's yet by the time the book went to print. But this is something that they can be proud of. That was cool. So they get the physical copy was really great. And then on another like personal level, just to be tied to this era in some way, because barring the storm getting hot, the Mariners snapping this streak in a way that would be unprecedented, like this is for now the greatest era of Seattle sports, team sports history. This is, I would say rivaling some of those Don James Huskies teams, right? So I think to be tied to that in some way as a non-player, feels pretty cool, because if this does become a documentary, or if it just is my book, or this sparks other books or other just whatever the medium is to document this legacy, I'll be part of that. I'll do interviews 20 years from now, probably about the Legion of Boom and all these guys go in the Hall of Fame, and unfortunately when these guys may pass away, I'll be tied to that. That just feels kind of cool. I'm from here, I could see the rubble from my grandmother's backyard when they blew up the Kingdom, and the little like skip school spot when I went to Franklin High School was a view that overlooks T-Mobile and Lumen Park, or T-Mobile Park and Lumen Field, up there on Beacon Hill. So to be somewhat tied to that, it is a cool like professional thing. Even if the book is not like a bestseller, doesn't get any like actual tangible accolades, you can't erase that it's out now and it exists and it's tied to the greatest era of team sports in the city that I'm from.
Well put, my friend. Well, listen, as you know, because I talk your ear off every day we're at the VMAC, I'm a huge fan of your work. The first couple of things of yours that I read, I was like, this cat's different. He's awesome. And I've loved the connection you have with the guys. I'm thinking top of mind when you went to Texas and hung out with Quandre for a few days, that sort of stuff. That's really unique, one-of-a-kind content. So keep doing your thing. This book is awesome. And I can't thank you enough for your time on this show, man. Appreciate you.
Oh, man. Thank you for having me, man.
Thank you. Well, we certainly appreciate Michael-Shawn Dugar's time. We appreciate the book. It's a great book. You should check it out. The line goes, it's available on Amazon or wherever you get books. Mike even has a few copies on him at all times, that if he sees a fan or arrange a sale online, and he'll hand it to him at Lumen Field and stuff. Just a great dude. You know him too. And I was, listen, we really read a lot of books in this profession. This one I was really gripped by, learned a lot of new stuff, and even the stuff I knew already, I was like, oh, wow, didn't know that part of it. So yeah.
Well, and we want to make one quick programming note, by the way. It's very exciting for all of us here, Bill Fesh, Inside the Arena. This started out as a little audio podcast, and if you're listening to us via audio, you can also watch us now a couple of different times. Friday nights, 6:30, the CW, and after Monday Night Football on the mothership, KOMO TV.
Really great stuff. Especially that, you're talking about watching Monday Night Football, talking Seahawks. It doesn't get much better than that.
And the thing that doesn't change is there's one guy who always ends the show.
Yeah, you wouldn't have a show ending without our guy, David Lee. Take us out.
You've been listening to Inside the Arena with Niko and Chris. Please subscribe on your favorite platform. Until next time.
Inside the Arena was presented by Snoqualmie Casino and Hotel, Seattle's closest sports book.